Thanks, Peter, for that setup. Really appreciate that. I want to talk with you tonight about a group that we found in our research called the anxious middle, and how we avoid them at our peril, ignore them at our peril, and that there really is something we can do about it. So consider your news feed. Abortion, war, shortages, abuse, and generally framed from a divisive context of either them versus them, or if you listen to Tucker Carlson, it's you versus them. So it's a world divided, as we hear. My neighbor told me, you got to choose a side, he demanded, actually. I read one story 3 times about our divided nation. Even journalists are exhausted by this. So I want to tell you a bit about this research that we've done. And we generally interview folks and observe their behavior. And in this last round, what really came out was anxiety. A ton of anxiety about the content of the news. I'm always looking for information that just isn't to scare or push bias. I'm looking for actionable information. And also anxiety about being on the wrong side. Not the wrong side of politics or the wrong side of history even, but the wrong side of information. So Leilani here talks about being confused, and this is the wrong side of information, where on the one hand, you're not sure about what you're looking at. Is it truthful? You're not sure if you're being fooled. Mariah, I'm very concerned about fake news because with social media, it's everywhere, and you just start believing it. So what can we do to help folks like this? Well, first of all, they don't trust themselves, and they don't trust journalists to tell them the whole story. So Alina, I have to do as much more checking up than I ever did before. So I want to go back to our earlier research where, sorry, I'm a little ahead here. I want to go back to our earlier research where we found 4 user types. So the first one was the avid news user, checking and cross-checking news, the engaged, just like it sounds, the opportunistic, who's just there when the news washes over them. And every single one of those groups got more engaged in the recent round of research, including this angry disengaged, who is now engaged with false information. So consider Sean, who started out watching his local news, and then he got interested in a newsletter, and he clicked on that. Now he says, I get about 800 emails a day for news, like the Patriotic Voice, the Survival Guide. So Sean has made up his mind. He knows what's trustworthy. But there are others that we can help. And we think about, well, where did Sean come from? And these are the folks that I want us to pay attention to. The engaged and the opportunistic, the anxious middle. And these folks, when you're anxious, you're vulnerable to misinformation, you're vulnerable to xenophobia, to homophobia, and you're vulnerable to being activated, for harm. So we can learn from other organizations or other areas, such as vaccine hesitation research, where we hear about the movable middle. So that anxious middle is movable. Well, what are some of the strategies they use? I thought about that, and I thought about, well, how can we apply that to news? One of the things is providing information, not like you have to do this or you should do this, but information to make your own decisions. So providing some structures and approaches so people can feel more confident about their decisions around choosing news. Another area has to do with changing the way we frame the news. And you heard a bit about this from Richard, where the world seems so divided. It's as if it's irreparable. There's nothing we can do. And yet, is that really true? And that's the kind of frame that locks people into a forced choice. You have to choose one or the other. But now, hat tip to Chris for the slide, in another area of research, we can think about, well, what's a little more nuance here? Where is that uncertainty that we can help maybe cultivate? Maybe that's useful. Another thing to think about is the constant framing around conflict, which again is forcing us into framework of division as opposed to framework of possibility. So avoiding that binary thinking and going to, and we hear this from constructive journalism and solutions journalism, going to shared values and also what can be done. So talking with folks about what is their vision of possibility instead of locking them into divisive frames, and providing also opportunities and tools for them to learn about ways to build their own confidence in choosing the news with informed basis, and also helping them to imagine the world that might be.